Greetings, salutations, and welcome to SportsLook, the sports television program for the high plains of West Texas and eastern New Mexico. I'm your host, Doc Elder, and this isn't our first rodeo of the semester here on SportsLook, but it is our last rodeo of the semester here on SportsLook. So we're going to bring in the head coach of Rodeo here on SportsLook. We're also going to bring in one of our own students from the SportsLook crew. I'll finish up with an overtime, but as always, I'll start out with an Eastern recap. Tough weekend for Greyhound softball. They dropped a doubleheader against Texas A&M International. They'll finish up the season at home this weekend. For Greyhound track and field, big weekend. They've got the Lone Star Conference Outdoor Track and Field Championships. Greyhound baseball played their last 4 games of the season last weekend against Texas A&M International. They lost their first 2 games, but they won game 3 of the series. And then on Sunday, last game of the season, they got a dramatic 2-run home run in the 11th inning. They won their last game of the season, so congratulations, Coach Price and company. Well, that will conclude the Eastern recap, so we'll record this out, and we're going to bring in John Sharp from Greyhound Rodeo right now. Welcome back to SportsLook. A privilege to bring back to the set of SportsLook the head coach of Greyhound Rodeo, John Sharp. And Coach, this is going to be a tough act to follow. You've had a pretty successful first year here.
Yes, sir. Just trying to make it not a flash in the pan. Try to make it every single year.
Well, we'll remind people the year started out with College Days Rodeo, and your kids won a team title. It finished up in Loveland, Texas, and your kids won a team title.
Yeah, it's been really cool. Rodeo is a game of ups and downs. They always talk about rodeo is a lot like life. It teaches you a lot of lessons with life. It teaches you to take the good, take the bad, show up every day, have your self-discipline, have your work, and continue to push through the things that are going to make you be successful in anything, not just rodeo-wise, but in working or in relationships with people and things like that. That'll help these kids for years and years to come down the road.
Coach, obviously, when you took the job, there were certain things that you thought you knew about being a head coach at Eastern New Mexico University. Some of them probably came true. Some of them were like, didn't see that coming. So what was the one thing you really expected that came true, and what was the biggest surprise?
I think the thing that I really expected to come true was I really thought the men's team, Eastern New Mexico always drew to me, and I graduated from Tatum. We've talked about that, not too far away. And, I was always really attracted to this place. And I just always had the idea in my mind of being able to build a successful men's team here with local kids and kids from far away and be able to bring titles back from not just the women's team, but the men's team as well back to Eastern New Mexico. And I was glad we got to do that in year 1.
So obviously you had some kids that came back. You had one young man in particular that we brought in. So who was the kid that you really expected to do well, and who was the young man that was the biggest surprise this year?
The young man that was the biggest surprise to me was probably Bodie Neese, and he had ups and downs, and Bodie and I have talked about it. He roped some calves at the end of the year that were kind of some pressure calves that we needed to put himself in a pretty good spot, and they didn't really go his way, but that was the first time he'd ever really been in that spot, and he's just a junior. He'll have one more year, and I think the experience that he learned this year, I think that was just awesome for him to gain going into next year, getting a full runway for his senior year. I look for great things to come from Bodie. He's just a great young man from here in Portales. One kid that I kind of knew, Jacob Walters. I've known Jacob for the last, 4 or 5 years. He's been a pretty vital part in my life. When I was going to school at Texas Tech, I let him crash on my couch when his rental agreement didn't work out when he first moved there. And, so he's kind of been like my little brother in some ways, and it was really cool to have him come over here and have him be a part. And I think the one thing that I got to see this year that was really awesome for our team in general was I got to see him, kind of rub off on the younger guys. I got to see him kind of show these guys that had never really been around a men's team and been around winning at a high level what it's like and what it takes and what it requires. And I think that's what you saw, back-to-back men's team titles at WT and South Plains. I think that was our younger guys because we were doing it with a lot of freshmen and sophomore other than Bodie and Jacob. I think our freshmen started to realize, like, okay, this is what it's going to require from me on any given weekend to be a part of a successful winning team. And I think next year, like, that's something that we'll see in the team. And it'll be a little bit of that Jacob Walters, just kind of the seed he planted that'll keep growing in Eastern New Mexico for years to come.
I was really remiss in my duties. We were talking before we went on air, and you were reminding me of a little bit of history regarding the men. It had been a long time since the men had won a team title at a rodeo, and the guy that was the high point person back then is now a rodeo coach on his own.
Yeah, he was the rodeo coach at WT. At 2005, they went to Weatherford, Texas, and David Browder went down there, and I know his specialty was bareback riders and bull riders, I believe. And he had a bareback rider by the name of Cody Joe Bonds, and Cody Joe is now the rodeo coach at WT. So now Cody Joe was the coach at WT when we won our first men's team title in 20 years. And then it'll be really cool at the end of this week. I'll go back to WT, and my dad's actually going to get inducted into the WT Rodeo Hall of Fame. So me and WT, we kind of have a interlapped history with the Sharp family and WT Rodeo, and Eastern and WT, kind of like old rivals. They always just find a way back to each other.
Let's go back and let's talk about last weekend and the very successful rodeo for your guys. I don't think there was a category that you didn't win.
No, actually, in every event that we entered the men in, we were able to come out with the championship on. We won the tie down, we won the steer wrestling, we won the team rope and heading, we won the men's all around, and we won the men's team title. And Jacob won 3 of those, and then he won the all around. But we also chipped in, Bodie Neese won 3rd. Cutter Perio ended up placing 3rd in the region, and he'll go on to the college national finals. He made the short round that night, helped us with some points. Orrin Hart, he drew some tough steers over there, but, he chipped in 30 points. And when you win a team title, every single point matters, whether it's 5, 10, 30, 180, it all matters in the end.
We talked a lot about the guys so far. Let's flip it over and talk about the girls. The girls obviously got off to a really good start during the fall and then had kind of some tough luck during the spring semester.
And that's a lot my fault, Doc. I should have gotten a little more depth for us, coming in. We were pretty top heavy, and we had an injury at Hereford to Shaden Marsh. She kind of messed her ankle and her knee up, and that kind of took the wind out of our sails in the women's team just a little bit. And we were just kind of crawling right there across the finish line. Cassidy Lightfoot made the short round for us, and we had a chance. If Cassidy would have won the short round, won the average, we'd still end up about 10, 15 points short of making the college finals. But Cassidy, she's just a freshman, and it was a lot of pressure. She was kind of wondering what to do. I said, Cassidy, let's let them have it, and let's go down swinging. And if we lose trying to win first place, that's always a good way to go out.
And it is still remarkable that they came as close to getting to Wyoming as they did.
No, yeah, it was awesome. The women's team had a great year. We had some great young kids chip in, and, we kind of need to do the same with our women's group that we kind of did with our men's. We need to kind of show them what it's like to be a part of a winning culture, and our ladies are really hungry. That's the one thing I'll give them this year. They really, really wanted it. That's why I was really disappointed that they couldn't get it done. Not for me, for them. They wanted it so bad, and they worked their butts off, and it just didn't work out. But that's rodeo. In the end, you can let it get you down, or you can use it as a chance to bounce back and come back better.
I think probably the best proof of that is probably the low point of the season was the rodeo in Snyder, but your kids bounced back the next rodeo.
That's right. We went to Snyder, and it was kind of a drawing contest. We didn't really have the luck on our side there. And, we went back to Howard College, and we were needing some good points here and there, and we got some. Shaden stepped in the goat tie, and she got us some really good points. Harley Barella, a freshman, running a barrel horse at the second rodeo he'd ever been to. She wins the long round. And then we kind of get another bad luck deal. You know, they move the short round up on us. We can't really run him in 6 hours back to back. And then the horse just doesn't really run as good the second time as he did the first. But, you know, it's just kind of, it's fun, you know, to see these freshmen get put in spots that mean something, not just to them, but for their team, and see them kind of embrace the team aspect of what is an individual sport or rodeo.
I did have a question kind of schematically. Obviously, the university will have graduation on May 9th, but the National College Finals Rodeo not until June. So will your kids go home and practice there, or will they stay here and practice?
They'll go home and practice. I've talked to each of them, and they kind of want to all get back to their house and practice with mom and dad, which will be good. You know, I'm always one phone call away if they need me, and I'll be there for them, and we'll get ready to go to the college finals in Casper. The main thing I'm telling them, make sure you pass your final exams and make sure you're eligible for the college finals. That's the main thing we need right now.
I was smiling, as a matter of fact, when you were talking about the young Miss Barella, because she was a student of mine. And that's one thing I'll say for rodeo kids. They may miss class, but they're always really good about clearing it beforehand.
Yeah, you know, Albert really started a good program built on student athletes, and he really emphasized the student part. And that's one thing I don't want to lose. You know, I want to continue to build our competitive side with both the men's and the women's, but I sure don't want to lose our student side of it. And I want to make sure that they know that the requirements stay the same. You know, we want you to be good in the classroom. We want you to be good stewards of our team. That way, whenever they're in your class, you have good things to say about the rodeo team.
Well, Coach, we've got about a minute left, and I know that it's not just you. There are many individuals that help you put on rodeo. So who do you want to thank?
Well, I really want to thank all you guys, you know, I mean, and the University of Eastern. You guys do so much to help get our sport out and help bring our kids into situations. You know, we sent Oren in here last week, and, you know, I think that was his first ever television interview, you know, so it's kind of cool to give these kids that experience and give them something that they can go back and build on, and give them multiple years of experience that they'll be able to use whether they go on into a career or whether they go on to be professionals. You know, it's good to have this as an opportunity, not only for your students, but for ours, and the ability to get rodeo out and it be a mainstay at our university. It's just an awesome thing.
Well, we definitely know you're a mainstay. So, Coach, congratulations. We wish your kids the best of luck in June in Wyoming.
Thank you, Doc.
All right, well, that is going to wrap up our first interview segment. So we're going to clear the set, and we're going to bring in one of our own kids from the SportsLook crew right now. Welcome back to SportsLook, and a privilege to bring to the set of SportsLook a young man who actually is part of our crew, Sir Justin Bowen. And Sir Justin, welcome to this side of the camera.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Sir Justin, where are you from, and what was the process that got you here to the SportsLook crew at Eastern?
So I'm originally from Louisville, Kentucky. And so in 2020, my family and I, we decided to move to Albuquerque. We have family in Albuquerque. And so I graduated in Albuquerque in 2020, and then I took a gap year. And originally I didn't think I was going to go to college, but I decided to kind of like look into possibly going into community college. And so I started at I had spoke to an advisor at CNM in Albuquerque, and they were like, yeah, you can transfer to Eastern New Mexico University. And then I was like, you know, why don't I just go ahead and submerge myself into the experience? And so that's kind of how I got here, and I got accepted. And so, yeah, I started from there, yeah.
So what was the biggest adjustment going from the bluegrass state to the land of enchantment?
It was a huge adjustment, especially because of it being COVID. It was like we got here, and then like the week after there was like a shutdown, and so it was hard to kind of adapt. And I think that was one thing that the gap year kind of helped me just kind of like get a little bit acclimated to the environment over here in New Mexico. And so yeah, it was good. It was worth it though. But at the time, I was like, I'm ready to go back. You know.
Talk a little bit about your upbringing. What were you interested in as a younger man?
Growing up, I was always interested in like working with cameras. I thought I wanted to do like digital filmmaking at first, and so that's what I had started in at Eastern. I started majoring in digital filmmaking, and it didn't seem as if it was something that I really wanted to get into, and so I started looking into communications. I had talked to Dr. Dobson, and she had introduced me to the communications department, and so that's what I started figuring out. Okay, this is where I want to be.
And it's so sad. I mean, Patty Dobson, of course, was such a huge part of the comm department and
Yeah,
tragically passed away far
absolutely.
too
Yeah,
soon. But her legacy lives on in
for
students
sure.
like you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, in terms of film, what types of films did you like to watch when you were younger?
I was a huge Adam Sandler fan. So, like anything Adam Sandler, I enjoy a little comedy. And so that was something that I always enjoyed watching. Yeah. And so I was like, I want to try to get something in that realm. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about your adjustment to life here at Eastern New Mexico University. I mean, probably you knew that there was an Eastern, but before you actually started going here, how much did you know about the school?
I didn't know anything about the school. Yeah, I was just trying to like say I was looking at colleges. Like my dad was like, "Hey, maybe you should start looking at colleges during my gap year," and I was like, well, let me look at community college because growing up, my academic reputation wasn't up to par for what I would think that college would need, and so I was just like, let me just look and say that I'm doing something, and so they were like, yeah, Eastern has a great program, and so and I was eligible because I graduated from Albuquerque Charter Academy. I was eligible for the lottery scholarship and opportunity scholarship, and so moving here, it opened a lot of doors for me, and so I was able to kind of find Eastern and just get submerged into the environment, and I'm grateful for it.
Well, to borrow the title of a novel from the 1920s, you were kind of a stranger in a strange land. And
Yeah.
who here at Eastern really helped to welcome you and kind of show you the ropes?
There's so many people. I would say like Ray Koss. I started like working with Campus Life, getting involved with like ASAB, and then also like Steve Stock. I'm a hall director now. I started out as a RA, and so just getting submerged into different things that I didn't even think would be possible. I feel like those have been some huge things, and then also just like upperclassmen. I'm in student government, and so I was introduced with Tamia Smith, one of our former presidents, and then Peyton Santiago.
Santianes,
Yeah,
yep, he's
Santianes. Yeah.
a former
Former,
SportsLook guy.
yeah,
Yep,
absolutely, and he
exactly.
was vice president as well, and so they were the ones that kind of introduced me into campus, and so it was just awesome. Yeah.
We've talked about the fact that you are part of the SportsLook crew. How did you get involved?
I got involved through like my practicum, and so Sports Looks. I think it was like one of my first ones that I started out with, and so I started out working with the jib. It was a struggle, but we made it though. Yeah, and then I've worked with KNEW, and I've done some like outsource video shots and everything like that, and editing.
And we will tell people that there are two types of cameras in the studio. There are
Hmm.
stationary cameras, but the jib is the one that does the moving
Yeah,
images. So that requires a skill.
for sure. Yeah, I
So
know.
what's the most difficult thing that you've done here as part of the SportsLook crew?
I would say the jib. That was probably the difficult one, but I feel like everything else was really smooth. I've done audio and I've done camera, the other camera operating, and so I've really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Is there one job here on SportsLook that you wish you'd had a chance to do, or were you pretty happy with the experience that you got?
I'm pretty happy with the experience that I've gotten. I've been able to kind of touch a little bit of everything, and so it's been awesome.
Let's talk a little bit about the guy who was both of our bosses, Alan Crawford. Talk about your relationship with him.
Yeah, he's been really great. Yeah, giving me so many opportunities, allow me to like learn different things about what it means to be a camera operator, and he was my right hand man with learning how to operate the jib and everything like that. And so I've been so grateful for the opportunities that he's provided me with through KNEW.
Well, now that you are the veteran leader here, who have you taken under your wing this year and tried to help them understand what it's like to be part of a team?
That's a great question. So I've just been like a a side person, kind of like just being able to support anybody if there's like any need that they need for like camera operating, or I was like, I started doing tapes this year, and so like kind of giving them some hints about doing the tapes and just kind of what I've learned about recording and everything like that. Yeah.
We've had so many interesting guests during your time here at SportsLook. It might be hard to identify just one, but if there was one guest that we had that was like, wow, that person was really cool and that was a really good interview, who would you look back to?
That's a great question. One thing I feel like I know we just recently had Rodeo here, but I feel like we've had a lot of great rodeo guests, and I feel like sometimes they get overlooked. And so I think like a lot of the rodeo people are great, and I know we've had some like other like camera operators from the athletics, and they've come in here and had some interviews, and I feel like it's just awesome to hear their side from things. Yeah.
And that's one thing we do strive for on SportsLook is we try to cover everything.
Yeah.
So we had the esports coach, we've had the cheer coach,
Right.
we had strength and conditioning. So that's something we've really strived for. So
Yeah.
let's talk about you as a student. What has been your favorite class at Eastern?
My favorite class, I would say television production. That was one of my favorite ones with Colt Owens, and so we kind of got to have the opportunity to practice interviews and practice manning the camera and everything like that. I feel like it was a little bit of a pre-course of what we do here with SportsLook and KNEW.
And that might actually lead into the answer to the next question, but I'll ask it anyway. Of all the professors that you've had at Eastern, I mean, the course may not have been your favorite, but the professor might have been. So who did you really like as a professor?
I really enjoyed Colt Owens and Lonnie Berry. I feel like they were able to kind of pull out some creativity in me and everything like that, and just allowing me to be able to test anything out, because there's many things that we can do within the television production realm. Yeah.
So what was the hardest class you took at Eastern?
The hardest class? That's a great question. Probably.
See, for me, the answer would be math.
Yeah, I was like, I would think math, or I would say like I took a psychology course, and it wasn't that it was hard, but it was just that it was a little bit challenging, or like we had like a lot of paperwork or something like that, and so I feel like that it just maybe the course load was probably the hardest part, but I feel like majority of my classes I've really enjoyed. Yeah.
So let's talk about the future. What are you going to be doing next year, and what do you hope to be doing 20 years from now?
Yeah. So this is my senior year. I'll be graduating this May, and I'll be coming back from my master's. I'm going to do my master's in business, and so for like my 20-year look ahead, I think I want to lean into being a public relations funding manager or a marketing manager. And so, yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards that, wanting to work towards that, yeah.
Well, I was telling you at a previous point in time that I have a daughter-in-law who got a master's in business administration, so I can speak to that.
Yeah.
Well, Sir Justin, for people that are in high school and they're watching this program, what would you say about Eastern? What has Eastern done for you?
I would say Eastern is such a great university. Having the small classrooms and stuff like that, I feel like that's able to connect students closer to like the professors and everything. I'm just so grateful for the opportunities that Eastern has brought me, and just I would encourage incoming students and freshmen to connect with whoever they can, connecting with the professors, connecting with faculty and staff, because the opportunities that can open it's unending.
And I really appreciate your honesty, because a lot of times when I ask former students what their favorite class was, I expect them to say my class. No, you actually said one that was your favorite. Yeah. But it was a pleasure to have you as a student, pleasure to have you on SportsLook, and
yes,
we wish
sir.
you the best of luck.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, well, that is going to wrap up our interview portion of SportsLook, so we'll clear this out, and I'll finish up with an overtime right now. All of us from the land of enchantment were bummed at the NFL draft because our very own Diego Pavia, a young man from Volcano Vista High School, went undrafted. And why are we bummed? Because in college, he led New Mexico Military Institute to a national championship, went to New Mexico State, made them relevant in football, and then went to Vanderbilt, where he took the Commodores to a bowl game. But if you want to talk about an undrafted quarterback who really is bummed, I think you'd identify Mark Gronowski. Never heard of the guy? He's the winningest college quarterback ever in Division I football. Look it up. He was at South Dakota State, led them to 2 national championships, and then his last year of eligibility last fall, he transferred to the University of Iowa, where he took the Hawkeyes to an 8-4 record and a win in a bowl game. And interestingly enough, the bowl game that Mark Gronowski and the Iowa Hawkeyes won, they beat the Vanderbilt Commodores and Diego Pavia. So there. Well, that will conclude in overtime, and that will wrap up an episode of Sports Look, our last Sports Look for the spring semester of 2026. I'd like to thank my guests, John Sharp and Sir Justin Bowen. Had a floor crew once again led by Ms. Jasmine. So for all of those aforementioned people, this is Doc Elder saying, so long.